ممكن تبدأ بمقدمة عن نفسك، وين كنت عايش ووينك الآن؟
عليكم السلام. أنا كنت عايش طبعا في اليمن في ما قبل عام 2000. تمام. سافرت على السعودية في 2003 2005. كنت أعمل في السعودية في شركة من إحدى الشركات لغاية 2017. تركت السعودية بسبب بعض القوانين اللي صدرت اللي تلزم الأجنبي إنه يدفع رسوم. كانت صعبة علي إني أدفع الرسوم، وكانت باهظة جدا. يعني واحد ما كان يقدر يجدد إقامته بسبب الرسوم كانت عالية. هذه قوانين إحنا ما نقدر نعترض عنها. ففكرت إني أنا أخرج من السعودية وأهاجر. سبب الهجرة إنه ما أستطيع أدخل اليمن بسبب الحرب اللي موجودة في اليمن. ففكرت إني أنا أهاجر إلى أحد الدول الأوروبية. كان عندي فيزا مسبقة تمكنني من الدخول إلى أوروبا.
يعني لا، تقول لنا كيف كانت الأوضاع في اليمن قبل ما تيجي السعودية، وقبل بداية الحرب؟ كيف كانت المعيشة في اليمن وكيف هي الآن بعد الحرب؟
قبل الحرب طبعا اليمن كانت معيشة عادية جدا، فقر وبطالة، وما في قوانين نمشي عليها في اليمن. أنا ما حضرت الحرب ولا كنت عايش في اليمن بعد الحرب، لأني كنت في السعودية أعمل هناك. يعني سافرت من السعودية إلى أوروبا عبر فيزا من إحدى الدول. تركت أهلي في دولة مجاورة لأوروبا. بعدت عن أهلي تقريبا 2.5 سنين حتى إن اجتمعنا هنا في ألمانيا. فترة قضيتها في السويد 6 أشهر. لم أتمكن من الحصول على الإقامة بسبب بصمة دبلن. معاملة السويد كانت شوية مشددة، اللي معاه بصمة دبلن. وأيضا المستشفيات هناك معدومة تماما. المستشفى موجودة لكن دكاترة ما فيش.
قبل ما
بعد ما جلسوني 6 شهور وأنا منتظر إنهم يعطوني رد مقابلة اللجوء، انتظرت مقابلة الرفض. فاجأوني وصدموني. المفروض يخبروني من أول يوم أنا حضرت إنه أنا عندي دبلة، بس ما خبروني.
اوكي، كيف كانت من ناحية معيشة وصحة؟
معيشة كانت صعبة. طبعا الاهتمام باللاجئين شوية مهمل. بينقلوك على شمال السويد، منطقة باردة جدا جدا. يعني الثلوج تصل إلى نصف أو ربع الجسم من شدة البرودة. المصاريف قليلة جدا. يعني يدوب تشتري لك علبة سيجارة إذا أنت تدخن وتخلص 600 كورونا أو 700 كورونا.
المصاريف الشهرية كانت،
المصاريف الشهرية 70 يورو شهرية. إذا بتحاول إنك تصرف على أهلك صعب بالمبلغ هذا، وممنوع إنك تشتغل لو ما عندك إقامة ولا أحد بيشغلك. تمام. الظروف كانت صعبة. 6 شهور مرت الجحيم. تفكير على الأسرة إنه ما عندهم مصاريف، وتفكير في نفسك إنك أنت متى بتحصل على الإقامة، أو إنك يعطوك طريق تعيش فيه حياتك بالسويد. الرفض جاء حطم كل الأمنيات اللي كنت أتمناها في العيشة في السويد. حاولت إني أنا أترك السويد بعد ما جاني الرفض. سافرت على الدولة القريبة اللي هي ألمانيا. ألمانيا تعتبر نوعا ما مش متساهلة يعني بالبصمة، ولكن عندهم قوانين تمكنك إنك أنت تكسر بصمة دبلن وتعيش في ألمانيا. جلست في كامب اللاجئين ما يقارب 8 أشهر، حتى إني جاني قرار إنه ألمانيا مسؤولة عنك. وجدت صعوبات في الترحيل وما الترحيل، ولكن عدت. المصاريف كانت الأسبوعية 30 أو 33 يورو. تستطيع أنك تعمل أجر يومي بتاخذه في الأسبوع بيوصل أيضا إلى 30 يورو. تمكنك أنك أنت تساعد أسرة حتى لو بالقليل في الدولة اللي هم عايشين فيها.
ولو تشوف إنه ألمانيا كانت أفضل في التعامل مع اللاجئين؟
ألمانيا في التعامل مع اللاجئين أفضل بكثير من أي دولة أخرى. عندهم إنسانية أكثر. القوانين سهلة قليلا. زي ما قلت لك المصاريف تخليك تصبر على الفترة اللي أنت تقضيها حتى تعدي فترة البصمة. أيضا العمل أثناء المكوث في الكامب تعمل مع الصليب الأحمر. هذا في الكامب. في فرص عمل داخل الكامب مش خارج الكامب. خارج الكامب ممنوع. أيضا المناخ مريح. لا يوجد ثلوج وبرد شديد مثل السويد.
تتكلم عن المدة بعيد عن أسرتك. أنت قضيت فترة في السويد وفترة في ألمانيا. نجيك تتكلم عن هذه الفترة، كيف كانت صعوبتها وإيش أبرز؟
كانت الصعوبة كانت قبل أن أحصل. بعد أن حصلت على الإقامة بدأت في إجراءات لم الشمل. حصلت على إقامة سنة، وألمانيا تسمح لأصحاب السنة بلم الشمل. حتى السويد لو حصلت على الإقامة السنة في السويد لا يحق لك لم الشمل. ألمانيا مساحيق كثيرة في لم الشمل، أوراقك مكتملة تحصل على لم الشمل أسرع.
طيب ايش الأعمال اللي تحتاجها من نواحي قانونية؟ ايش الاشياء اللي تحتاجها مثلا للم الشمل؟ هل هي امور مقدور عليها ولا امور كانت شبه مستحيلة وانت كانت بالنسبة لك يعني كنت محظوظ انك توفرت فيك هذه الظروف؟
على حسب الشخص. أنا كانت أوراقي مكتملة، جوازات السفر التي تخص أسرتي، وجواز السفر موجود معي أيضا. شهادات الميلاد للأطفال، عقد الزواج، كرت العائلة، أمور تخص بإثباتات الشخصية.
اوكي.
وكانت مكتملة. أيضا لو يوجد تقارير طبية لإحدى الأطفال أو لزوجته، هذه تساعد أيضا في سرعة لم الشمل. راجعتها أيضا المصاريف قليلة يعني تكفي شخص واحد، ولكن طبعا ما تستطيع أن أقتصد منها. هي الصعوبة هي عدم التمكن الحصول على العمل إلا بعد حصولك على اللغة. بدون لغة لا يوجد عمل. مكتب العمل يحاول إنه جاهد إنك تحصل على العمل بعد أن تحصل على اللغة. اللغة شوية صعبة. اللغة الألمانية صعبة. تمام. يحتاج لها جهد شديد حتى إنك تتعلم اللغة. العمل حاولت أن أقدم كذا مرة على عمل في DHL في البريد الألماني، لكن بدون لغة لا يوجد قبول.
تسجيلات لتعلم اللغة على حساب الحكومة ولا تدفع؟
المساعدات تأتي من الحكومة للحصول على اللغة. إذا أنت استمرت ونجحت لديك 3 فرص. الفرصة الأولى 600 ساعة، الفرصة الثانية 300 ساعة، الفرصة الثالثة 150 ساعة. بعد كده ينقلوك على إحدى المنظمات هي التي تساعدك في اللغة.
السؤال الأخير، باعتقادك من واقع تجربتك إيش أبرز المشكلات أو الصعوبات اللي على الحكومات الأوروبية تسويها عشان تسهل عملية الهجرة ولم الشمل؟ من أنت دحين عدت.
الصعوبات كما قلت لك مسبقا إنه بصمة دبلن بتمشي على الجميع، على الغني وعلى الفقير، على اللي يجيب الطيارة وعلى اللي جاي بالسيارة. في ناس عندها مصاري تستطيع أن تدخل إلى أي دولة أوروبية بدون بصمة. هذه الناس بتحصل على الإقامة أسرع منك.
عندهم
المفروض الشخص اللي ما عنده بصمة هذا الشخص المفروض هو اللي يتعامل معاملة شديدة، لأنه هذا الشخص مقدور وعنده فلوس حتى إنه يوصل إلى هذه الدولة الأوروبية. أما الشخص اللي عنده بصمة هذا الشخص اللي هو تعب حتى إنه وصل للدولة اللي يريد أن يعيش ويستقر فيها. وليست جميع الدول الأوروبية كبعض، هناك دول يستطيع اللاجئ أن يعيش حياة بكرامة، وهناك دول بعد الحصول على الإقامة يترك في الشارع.
طيب عشان مثلا إنه قانونيا الناس اللي دخلت بطريقة غير شرعية تسهلت أمورهم أكثر من الناس اللي دخلت أوروبا بطريقة رسمية.
نعم.
إذا أنت معك تأشيرة ودخلت أوروبا حتواجه صعوبات أكثر مما لو أنت دخلت أوروبا بتهريب أو بتزوير من غير تأشيرة.
اللي دخل أوروبا تهريب ربما يعاني أيضا من بصمة دبلن، ولكن أنا أتكلم عن الأشخاص اللي عندهم إمكانية في التزوير.
أوكي. يعطيك ألف عافية، شكرا على استضافتك، ونتمنى لك التوفيق في إقامتك الحالية في ألمانيا.
شكرا جزيلا أخي الكريم.
Rakan, thank you for your interview. Thought that was super interesting. I'm going to give the word to Viola now.
Yeah, I have to share my screen. I'm going to do that now. Yeah. Right. So I'm going to tell you a bit about the legal context of migration. We've heard some things. We've heard something about Dublin. We have heard something about torture. And I'm going to try to explain a bit where migrants, and I'm focusing on asylum seekers, but I'm going to tell something about migrants as well, what kind of procedures these people are in, and what kind of problems they do get in. And in doing so, I hope to get a more understanding about what these people are going through, because these legal procedures are extremely important for them. Because once they've got a residence permit, they have, as we already heard, right to housing, etc., etc. But before that, they are stuck in an asset C, as we call that, which is a reception center. I'm going to share this sheet first. This is a sheet you've seen before. Just some numbers. I'm not going to discuss that because the first speaker already did, but I also wanted to show you because you heard these different terms, right? So we're talking about asylum seekers, refugees, migrants, stateless people. Just some clarification. People that are fleeing their own country and crossing a border are called asylum seekers, at least if they have, as I'm going to discuss later on, for instance, they are afraid for their life. Refugees are people that who we already know that they fit the term refugee, which means that they have encountered some serious problems. Then we have migrants, which is a very difficult term because migrants can mean anything, but for instance, within the EU, or the United Nations is also saying such, migrants have fled their country not for reasons where their life is threatened, but for other reasons, which might be everything. And then we have stateless people. And stateless people are people that don't have a nationality. So they don't have a passport, but they also don't have a country that will protect them. I also put in this slide, which shows a bit about migration routes, because as you heard before, there are a lot of different routes to across Africa in this case, as you can see, but also to get into Europe. And of course, there is a lot of focus now on Greece. That's also because most of the people come in via Greece. There are also a lot of people coming in via Italy. Also a bit through the Spanish islands that are on the coast of Africa. So this is sort of that you know how people get into Europe. Just to give you a short idea about the travel routes that they have to take in order to get here. If we go back to the first slide, what you can see is that a lot of people don't do this. Most people go to neighboring countries if something happens in their own country. So the people that we see in Europe that come, for instance, from Syria, Afghanistan, or Africa, it's just a small amount of people that are actually coming to Europe. So, the legal basis for protection of refugees is the 1951 Refugee Convention. This was a convention that was drafted after the Second World War in order to host refugees that were scattered all over Europe or all over the world due to the Second World War. But we still use it now, which is an understatement. It is the basis of refugee protection. This convention holds a definition of a refugee, and I think this is very important. You need to be outside your country. You must be persecuted based on race, religion, nationality, a political opinion, or a social group. T needs to skip there. But most important, and I think that is if you want to work with these people, there is no protection from your own country. But that is the reason why we protect refugees, because otherwise no one will protect these people. All right, then something about Europe, because Europe has what we call extra protection, which is subsidiary protection. And one example is, what about people that are living in a city that has been bombed, or people facing death penalty? If we go back to this definition, if your house is bombed because you live in a city that is on the front of a war, you're not persecuted based on race, religion, or etc. At least you, not as an individual. So Europe has added some extra protection. If you're facing death penalty or execution, or torture or inhumane or degrading treatment, or, and that is the last category, a serious and individual threat to a civilian's life by reasons of indiscriminate violence, then in Europe you can get a residence permit. And that is, for instance, what we see a lot of people from Syria. They are not persecuted based on individual reasons, but they are persecuted based on random attacks on their house, for instance. All right, and then the Netherlands. Just to give you some indication, we have had 13,814 applications from January till September 2020. We also have an act in the Netherlands which is called the Vreemdelingenwet 2000. And then something about the procedure, because I think this is important. We have a rest and waiting period in the reception centers. And as for now, because there are a lot of people that are applying for asylum, this rest and waiting period can be a long time. So it looks good on paper, because if you look on paper, the procedures should be done in 10 days. But if the rest and waiting period is longer, then you have to stay in the AZC. If you are in the AZC, you're not allowed to work. You have a weekly financial allowance. And most people are quite bored in these centers, waiting for their procedure. All right, So say you get into the procedure, which consists of 10 days, you get help from the Dutch Refugee Council, and I've seen a lot of people asking about what can I do. One of the options is to volunteer for the Dutch Refugee Council. So that might be an option for people that want to help as well. Right, so in those 10 days you get 2 hearings, 1 intention to decide and 1 formal decision. If you get a positive decision, you have the right to housing, and that is something that we've seen in the news quite a lot as well, that municipalities are saying we're not going to house refugees because we don't have houses for, as we call that Dutch people. Of course, there's a lot of criticism on that as well, but you do have right to housing. As for now, since there are not enough houses, people still have to wait in the reception center. So a positive decision also gets you a temporary residence permit for 5 years. There is discussion whether we should lower it to 3 years, but for now it's for 5 years. And after that, you can either ask for a permanent residence permit or naturalization. And naturalization gives you some benefits because you become a Dutch citizen, you can vote for Dutch Parliament. The other thing is that since you are a Dutch citizen, you cannot lose your nationality. That is different if you have a permanent residence permit. So if you have a very long criminal record, for instance, it might be that you lose that one. So that is a difference between a permanent residence permit and naturalization. Some people get a negative decision, more than 50%. So they have to appeal to the district court and then to the High Council of State. Dublin 3, I think we've seen these images over and over again, and our previous speaker also told about Dublin 3 and also about rich people that don't get fingerprinted. Just some clarification about what he's talking about. What happens is that if you want to travel to Europe, you have different options. One is a tourist visa, as our previous speaker has done, which means that you have a visa and you get by plane, you go to Schiphol and then you ask for asylum. But most people don't do that. So most people cross by boat, which means that officially, according to the European Union, you are irregular, not irregular according to me, but you are irregular in Europe. And then you apply for asylum. The question is why in Greece, because that is for now the best route. It depends on smugglers, how much you have to pay and how easy you can get there. Dublin 3 says that you have to apply for asylum. Yes?
I have a question coming in. Is this a good moment to ask it?
Yes, sure.
So the question is from Will,
Yeah.
and it's, how are people who are, or in the future will be, climate refugees / migrants protected by these regulations? And is there anything in the pipeline that will further protect these potential millions of people?
Would it be all right to answer that in the end? Because climate refugees are something else than the refugees that I'm talking about. Because climate refugees are refugees that have to flee their houses because, for instance, and that's the most extreme example, the land they're living on is sinking in the sea. So if I can answer that in the end, if that would be okay. I'm going to discuss that as well. Mette. So you have to apply for asylum in the first member states of the European Union you arrive, which is mostly Greece or Italy. There are exceptions, for instance, unaccompanied minors who have family living in another country, say you're coming in Greece, but then you have family in Germany. As for the fingerprinting, what we have seen is that so many people were coming into the European Union in 2015 that a lot of people have come into Greece or Italy but were never fingerprinted and therefore could travel to other countries of the European Union. And what happens then is that officially they are entering the European Union in the first country where they apply for asylum, which in most cases would be Germany or Sweden or whatever. I have to go back to my so something about medical checks. if you get to this reception center, you get a TBC check. Some countries don't need that. There is a list on the webpage of the IND if you need to know that. During your stay in the reception center, you get a free medical check. And there is medical staff available in reception center, consultation hours, we've heard that before. Some of these medical checks might be relevant for the residence permit. If you have a serious medical condition, it might be that it's temporary permit. So I've put some things in a sheet. For instance, hearing and disabilities or medical problems might be relevant. Disabilities or medical problems might be relevant for the hearing. So it might be that that is adjusted, but also for the application. What we've seen, for instance, that a lot of people came to the Netherlands who need dialysis because they had problems with their kidneys. And for instance, there was only one dialysis unit available in their own country. Question is, can you send those people back or not? According to refugee law, they don't have a really good reason to flee their own country, but based on medical reasons, they have. What happens is that these people do get a residence permit 3 times, a very temporary one of half a year and then a temporary of 5 years. What we also see a lot, and it might be that you as a GP or another doctor might get involved in that, is that people that you have in your practice are removed from the Netherlands because, for instance, they lose their residence permit or because they never had a residence permit. It might be that medical issues are relevant then as well. For instance, if people have post-traumatic stress, or it might be that they have other physical or mental problems, which we see a lot because of the fact that they are in a for a long period they are in an uncertain situation. It might be that medical issues are relevant as well, because if the medical condition is severe enough, and I have to say that is a very high threshold, it might be that they are not removed. Another question is, can you remove people, for instance, that need medication and the medication is either not available in their country where they have to go to, or it might be that it is only available in the capital and let's say 300 kilometers away and they don't have a car to get there to, or for instance, people have mental problems and need a good network of family and friends in order to take their pills or to make sure that they are all right, but there is no good network. That are all relevant questions, medical questions, for doctors. And something about irregular migrants, because and it was discussed before, but irregular migrants don't have a legal status in the Netherlands. So the whole question, what is irregular, is if you don't have a residence permit or you're not allowed to be in the Netherlands. The legislator has decided that they don't get a social security number, which is very relevant in order to get health insurance, because if you don't have a social security number, you don't get health insurance. And if you don't have health insurance, you get in trouble if you go to a doctor, because he's trying to look you up and he doesn't find anything. The question is, do you need to help them as a doctor? And I've put some websites on the slides which you can look through in order to find out. But as said before, yes, necessary medical care needs to be given to this group of people as well. And then the question is, who's going to pay for that? You can go to it, CAK, where you can file a claim for medical expenses. I'm going to discuss the climate migrants and the LGBTIQ in a minute. Just a short word about migrants, because I've focused on asylum seekers now, but not every migrant is a refugee or an asylum seeker, and it might be that you see them as a doctor as well. For instance, if people get here due to study, work, or might be family reunification, they also have a residence permit, but based on other grounds. And before they get that residence permit, they can't travel to the Netherlands. So they have to apply for it in their own country of origin. And then they get a temporary visa, which is called an MVV, een machtiging tot voorlopig verblijf. And once they get into the Netherlands, they also get a temporary residence permit for 5 years with the possibility to apply for a permanent residence permit, or they can choose to get the Dutch nationality as well. As for first I go to the LGBTQI because I can go back to a slide. LGBTQI are a social group. So these people, if they are persecuted, and persecuted is something different than prosecuted. So prosecuted is that you have done something wrong according to the law and you are prosecuted, say you have murdered someone, something like that. Persecuted is also that you are prosecuted, but due to reasons that are, to say it simple, are not fair. So if for instance in the legislation it is said that it is forbidden to be, say, gay, and that if they find out you get the death penalty or you get executed, and there is an actual threat to your life, then you get protection based on the Refugee Convention, which means that you need to get a residence permit in the Netherlands. I saw, is this yeah. Then something about Nettie, and then I go to the climate change. Yes, I can understand that you're saying that, because that is true. What's the case is that these people are removed due to the fact that they don't have a legal status, and most of the times they've been in procedures for quite a long time. It might be that children with severe disorders are sent back. As for the issue in the application, sometimes it is. It depends on what the lawyer is saying. If he's saying we need protection because we are being threatened in our own country based on, say, political opinion, and the medical issues become a question whether they can be sent back or not. But sometimes it might be an issue if people are applying based on medical reasons. As for sending people back with severe disorders, what comes into play is Article 3 of the European Convention of Human Rights, the principle of non-refoulement, which means that you cannot return people if they are being killed or tortured or treated in a degrading manner. The European Court of Human Rights has ruled that medical issues can fall under that scope as well, but the criterion is very strict. So first we had, as we called that, the near-death criterion, which meant that if you were sent back, people would die within 2 or 3 months. This has changed a bit due to new jurisprudence of the European Court, but it is still very strict. Then something about the climate refugees, which is actually a completely different group. The whole discussion now is whether refugee climates can fall under the scope of the refugee definition. And what are climate refugees? Well, climate refugees are people that are fleeing their own country due to drought or anything else related to climate change. And it's a very complex group of people that is, as you said, very big, and it's growing more and more, because it looks like more and more parts of the world are facing those disasters. The question is how to relocate those people and how to make sure that they get a legal status. As for now, there is a lot of discussion about it, but nothing is actually done about it. So these people do not fall under the scope of a refugee definition. So it might be that they get into the Netherlands based on other reasons, but not based on climate change. All right.
Thank you so much, Fiona. Very interesting. And I don't think there are any more questions.
Well,
We're going to move on and show you a recording of Parvana Amiri and her poems.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen and show you a picture. I wanted to also mention that. Oh, Nienke already done it. Thank you, Nienke. I wanted to first of all say that all the pictures we used throughout the symposium and that we are showing also right now were taken by Yusuf, the first speaker. So, yeah, if you want to see more of his work, you can always check him out. But I wanted to close this symposium by reading out the poems of Parvana. So I will play now.
In the camps, we are limited and repressed. We are enclosed and depressed. In makeshift summer tents, we are fading in Greek camps. In the summer, it's like hell. In the winter, we live on mud. We are exposed to cold, to wind, without even warm clothes. Our children, while playing, their shoes sink into mud and sewage water. This condition is suffocating. Girls are trapped in the tents, their voices, their faces, among wolves leering, in fear for their integrity and honor. But how long will we live in here? How long should we suffer with these little children? How long will we live in war? In the camps with no peace, dignity, honor, or respect, far from our beloved ones. If only we could be evacuated.
Okay, so this first poem was by Parvana Amiri. She's a 17-year-old refugee from Afghanistan who is now in Greece, in a refugee camp herself, and she's also reporting the situation. And instead of pictures, she's reporting it by poems and short stories. I will now share the second recording of her second poem.
Fire. It does not only burn into ashes. It does not only destroy. It does not only kill. A fire. It can make light to see. It can guide in darkness. It can warm in the cold. A fire. A candle needs the fire. A meal needs the fire to start up, to turn on, to show out. But we don't need the fire. We have been burning a long time. We don't need the fire. We don't hold a candle in our night. In this fire, we lost our hopes. We lost our tents, our new homes. Here in this host country, in its camps, as we did in our country that we fled. In this fire, in Moria, in Samos, in Chios, in refugee camps around Greece, we have been burning silently, subjugated without dignity. Tens of us have burned, changed to bundles of coal. No raised voices, no closed fists. Silence has never been a solution. In this fire, we can find, we can move, we can want, we can raise our heads, our fists, our voices, asking for freedom of movement.
So thank you all. I just wanted to add a few words about the picture. And the first picture was taken in the second Moria camp, so the one they created right after the fire. And this picture was from Moria, was right after the fire when the people were forced to live in the streets, just to give a bit more context about what we are seeing. I think now Maki can go with his conclusion.
Yeah, so that was the webinar for today. I'd like to take a moment to thank each and every one of our speakers that gave their valuable contribution today. Yusuf telling us his story and his experience of his migration and living in Moria camp. And you can follow his work. I think we'll post an Instagram handle where he continues to document the situation there. We'd like to thank Steven van der Vijver as well for also giving his input regarding that initiative, and Simone Gozer and also Nazrat Ansari for their contributions. And we'd also like to thank Viola for her input regarding the legal aspect, as well as our anonymous guest who also told his personal story today. I hope that everyone learned a lot and will curious and interested in this topic, and also continue to advocate for the rights of migrants and stay engaged in migrant health. And we invite you again to contribute to Legal Centre Lesbos. We've already raised a large amount of money, but any further contributions that you can offer will go a long way. So we'd really appreciate that. And yeah, there have been a load of links added to the chat, as I can see. So there you can find further information with various sites regarding this topic and various aspects of it. And with that, again, I'd like to thank everyone attending, and we can conclude today's successful symposium.